I think it's already recording, to tell you the truth.
I have two recorders.
Oh, well, okay.
Yes, fancy. Watch out. I have a hardware recorder. This Zoom recording is yours if you want it, but I don't use it unless things go horribly wrong with the other recording. So,
Okay.
yeah. So anytime you're ready, take a shot.
All right. Hey there, hi there, ho there. This is Frank King, the mental health comedian from mentalhealthcomedian.com, and you're listening to Vroom, Vroom, Veer with Jeff Smith, reminding you that 8 out of 10 people who are suicidal are ambivalent. 9 out of 10 give hints in the last week leading up to an attempt, which means you can make a difference, you can save a life, and you can do it by doing something as simple as what Jeffrey and I are about to do, and that is have a conversation. Thank you.
Well said, sir. All right, let me hit stop. I'll be right back.
Are you ready to thoughtfully steer away from your revved up, frenzied, and far too often scripted life? Then welcome to Vroom Vroom Veer with Jeff Smith, where he guides you down the road differently traveled by sharing unique experiences with guests who have managed to shift away from a life stuck on cruise control and veered their way into a more authentic and fulfilling one in all sorts of interesting and kind of remarkable ways. Get ready to Vroom Vroom Veer with your differently traveled road chauffeur, Jeff Smith.
Kimberly Brandt, thank you so much for being on Vroom Vroom Veer and welcome to the show. How's it going?
It's going good. It's going really good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the invitation. I look forward to this conversation.
I think we're going to have some fun. And thanks for laughing at me for very distinctly reading your name so I didn't screw it up. I do that for everybody, not just you.
Awesome.
The worst thing you can do to anybody is screw up their name, right? So I try not to do that. Still do it, but I try not to do it.
Yeah.
Yes. So you are at walkerbrandt.com. So talk a little bit about what you're most excited about. You've got a new book, or maybe not a new book, but a book. So talk about what you want to talk about.
I do have a book. It's called AWAKEN, Discovering Yourself Through the Light of Your Innocence. And interestingly enough, it is sort of the result of a vroom, vroom, veer, a veer.
Right. A veer, yes.
As a result of a previous one. So it's really,
life is just a big list of veers, isn't it? With some vrooming in between, right?
Exactly.
Thanks for getting that. A lot of people, it just goes right over their head, but that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because if you're not clear on, you're not meant to know yet. You're not.
That's true.
That's what I think. For me, that's what vroom vroom veer. How I perceive it is life, because life is a amalgamation of our experiences and choices we make as a result of them. And sometimes we're cruising, and sometimes we're turning and sharply, and sometimes we're just sort of, moseying through. And I think for me, it's a beautiful visual. Those words bring up in me a beautiful visual for the lessons that life. I feel like a student in this experience. Every day I wake up and I wonder what my lesson is going to be, because I know I'm going to fall on my face somewhere. And I know I am. And somebody's going to look at me like, what? And I'm going to have to do an inventory. It's going to happen. It just is life, right?
Right.
So AWAKEN, it was interesting. Prior to the pandemic, many years prior, my husband had a life-threatening diagnosis, and that was a huge veer for me. I'm just vrooming along in my work, and so is he, and it was completely unexpected. And I literally veered so sharply. I sat down, and my husband and I both did, and we said, "Look, how are we gonna address this?" Because we are a team. We're like, lock arms, let's do this.
You and him versus the world.
It's like kind of, but me and him versus big pharma, essentially.
Okay. All right.
The influence of what we think or what we are told we ought to do, not necessarily, going after big pharma, obviously, but Big Pharma owns our medical institutions, and our doctors are trained a certain way. And if you don't remember that doctors are practicing, that's why it's called a practice.
Right.
You need to, there's going to often be a questionable result. So it's good to be aware
totally.
and proactive. Do your homework, do your research. Don't take one opinion.
No.
And so we sat down and made a plan, and it wasn't typical what the average person does. We knew that because his doctor was like, oh, no, you can't do that. There's nobody's able to do that. People can't live that lifestyle. It's just too difficult. And my husband's like, watch me. And so
hey, I've heard this story before. So yeah. If you get a life-threatening, diagnosis, the last thing you want to do is what you're told.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. I mean, there's a level of, even when you walk a pretty responsible life and you've been taking care of yourself, shit happens.
Yes.
And we need to be able to adapt, and remembering that that's one of our innate human skills, is to adapt.
Yes.
Is to be able to confront the unknown,
right?
Is to be able to deal with challenge, knowing that we have this resilience within us, being able to lean into it, even though we may not have practiced it in recent years in the way that we are being asked to now. That's what we had to sit down and get in touch with. Is we were really going into an unknown, and with a whole lot of known pressure out there, and concepts out there about it. And so we made a decision that we weren't going to tell anyone about it.
Okay. Probably
for years.
Smart. Okay.
Yeah. And we did this for years, which wasn't easy. I have to say, it was really challenging to do, because when you're watching your partner really suffering and going through pain, and you're not able to talk about it or lean into anyone.
You're missing your support system, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Even though I'm spiritual, I lean into spirit a lot, and I really did find the strength there. It was challenging for sure, because I'm a human being and I mess up, and there were days when, I could have been an easier mate, and I was feeling the stress of it myself, which made my husband feel the stress, which freaked me out because I didn't want him to feel any stress. So there was like this interesting dynamic, and I, like I said, I was cruising along my work, working all the time and it just literally made me veer based on what our values and our commitments to each other were, and our understanding of what's important in life was to us at that time. And we allowed that to impact, obviously how we made choices. So I started focusing on, I took homeopathy I dove deep into preventative protocols, and did a lot of research, went to school, went to LASH, the LA School of Homeopathy, so I could learn, after watching several videos on preventative and alternative protocols for curing his particular diagnosis. So that was a huge veer, because here I was, being an actor and loving it. I love my craft. I love acting. It's so much fun. It is and I'm just kind of going back into it now, which is really exciting, because what we went through went right into the pandemic, which pretty much threw everything into it.
Yes.
So, and my husband's cancer-free. Thank you very much, God. Thank you very much for him and his effort. But he's, it was, quite the journey, and that veer of deciding I'm going to choose to learn what I can for the sake of my partner and our understanding. It could be perceived as, oh my goodness, why, you don't know the first thing about homeopathy. Why would you put that pressure on yourself?
Right. Why would you do that?
Yeah. Why not just go
get the chemo, right?
Yeah. Just go with the chemo. Just go with, just do what they say. And it's just not my nature. I have always been a questioning, seeking person.
That's great.
It's just my life. It's been my life journey, is to question and to seek knowledge and truth and understanding, and to, as I grow and learn, become more responsible for, my own well-being and my family, and understand what that means. I mean, there've been a lot of years not knowing, as grow and learn, I certainly spent a lot of time on my face and on my knees, going, what the heck is happening?
Yeah.
Can I make a good choice today?
Yeah.
Is it gonna happen?
Can it happen? Yes.
Yeah.
There's all, yeah. So that's one good thing about surviving VEERS is you get to learn lessons. Some of the things, like I was telling you about that comedian who's in that persistent depressive state, and, some days you just have to kind of say, if I can just stay alive today, that's a win.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If I can just make it through the day without, just another serious depressive episode, that's enough. That's enough.
Yeah.
Today is a win. You don't always have to like do anything other than survive the day.
Absolutely.
And that's okay.
And that is 100% okay. And,
Right.
it's that's kind of what came up, because, it was one of those days for me when we got the news. It was, I was coming home from a great gig, and I had just, I'm cruising in the car, when you feel that a job well done experience.
You were vrooming. Yeah.
And you're just cruising, you are literally vrooming. Yeah. Everything just feels good. And I walk in to the house, and my husband's home. It doesn't make any sense. And he turns around, and I see this look on his face. And in an instant, this wash over my body that just, it's like cold chill. You just know that.
I know that feeling. I know that feeling. I think we all know that feeling.
Yeah. And you just, something's wrong. And in that moment, and his, it's happening to him. And in this moment, the fear and what he's going through, I'm not him. I'm not inside him. So I can't, I want to make it better, but I cannot. There's a point I cannot. So I have to listen. At the same time, he's having trouble even articulating what he wants to tell me, and he does. And, what comes out is, this is a diagnosis. It is not a sentence. We have a choice.
I like that. Yeah.
We have a choice. Let's do our work. And I think in life, whenever we're in that cruising state, and it's going to happen to everyone, you're going to cruise, and then you're going to have a choice. You're going to veer one way or the other.
Right.
And it's going to be based on what you've experienced so far, what you perceive, what you want. But it's all of that perception of experience or what you are wanting that's going to drive you into your veer, and being okay with whatever it is, and gleaning, that lesson that's there. Even if you come out the other side, come out the other side many times where I've like, okay, all right, I'm scraping for the silver lining here. I'm scraping.
Right. Because you can't find it.
Yeah,
yes, it's too
but
dark.
It's there.
It's too dark.
It's always there.
It's always
and sometimes
there.
it's,
yes. When you're in it, it's nearly impossible.
Exactly.
When you're in it, it's nearly, you can't imagine. So I think what you're doing with your book and with what you're talking about now is what I'd like to say. It's sort of like a mental version of like a, what do you call it? Like a vaccine. It's a mental vaccine. I mean, that's a bad word, but I couldn't come up with anything else. It's like you're inoculated against future veers, if that makes any sense. Because when I get there and I'm in that darkness, and there's no way that I would do this to me. Like if I'm a soul, right? Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't pick this path. This is effing stupid, right?
Yeah.
Why would I do this to me? And then I remember that inoculation that said, no. You did. So you did it for a reason, right?
Yeah.
So the next thing you have to remember is you're probably okay if you're still thinking and breathing. You're probably okay in that moment. And then you can move on. And you can say, okay, what's the next stupid thing I got to do to get through this dumb day? I've been there so many times now. Like, it's like an inoculation against dread, I guess is what best I can. I never go doom, doom, doom all the way down anymore, which is kind of the point of this show. It's like, keep saying that.
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
think that's, that's the gift of awareness, right? You
Yes.
are making people aware with this. And I'm, like I said, the Vroom Vroom Veer is such a wonderful sort of visual word acronym for giving yourself, allowing yourself to live through your experiences and gain the awareness that makes your next steps perhaps a little bit easier and a little more informed.
Totally.
And maybe a lot better than you may have thought they would have been had you not veered.
Right.
That
right.
veer was a lesson. It reminds me of a quote that I love, which is, teach me the lesson and teach me it well. Teach me the lesson, let me learn it well so that I don't have to learn it again.
Yes. I've learned the same thing so many times. It's like, okay. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And some
Failing
of that
the
is
course.
Yes.
If you fail the course, you have to do it over. Damn it.
Dang it. Exactly. And some of that is, comes from something about that, that veer that we repeat is familiar to us.
Totally.
And we keep doing it because we, in our experience, the mind thinks that it's normal.
Yes.
But something inside of us isn't sitting well with it. It's uncomfortable in our body. There's our spirit, our hearts, another part of us, our other brain that's not the trained brain from experiences, from impressions and perceptions from our, where we grew up and what other people have said, our influences. That part of our the dynamic of who we are, which is an amazing thing, has a lot of control for a large part of our life until we become more aware. And these veers bring us into that awareness of understanding that, because we start to listen to that little twinge in our gut.
Yes, that small, quiet voice.
Exactly, or the small, quiet voice.
Yes.
Exactly. There's so many wonderful names for this.
Usually shows up around 3:00 in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. Can I just tell you how many years I spent? I'm talking years, a long time, not sleeping when I was going through, my husband and I were going through this, and I was trying to manage, all the habits that my body had in it and my mind within trauma like this and shock like this. I had to, what these veers do is they bring up and trigger, to coin a word that is used a lot, they trigger what's left in us, in our bodies that we're not aware of. And that for me is what happened in this situation is it's been such a huge wake up and awareness, of what was still left in there. And there's still more, I know, because there's more. And that drove me to reach into another community outside the community I was in, and into another community that I've been in. And I'm a personal development enthusiast. I love personal development. So I always, work it into whatever I do, because I've had to, by nature of where I came from and the family I grew up in. So I've had to survive, but I wanted to do more than survive. I wanted to thrive. And I wanted to not be an addict. I wanted to not be a manic depressive. I wanted to get beyond being suicidal. And these are all things, and get beyond anxiety. These are all things I struggle within my youth. And when I reached back in, it was that right timing. And I came across and met some wonderful people. And one of them was Lisa Nichols. And
Lisa Nichols.
Yeah.
I've heard that name.
Yeah, she's fantastic. She's wonderful. And she's the one that encouraged me to write a book. And when she said, and I share this often when I talk about my book, but she said these words: your book doesn't belong to you, it belongs to the person it can help.
Right. And
it's true. And those are just, powerful words. And for the longest time, I was afraid to write about my book write about my life because it was so personal. And, and and I didn't really share a lot of what I had lived through with anyone.
Right.
There were so many rooms and beers. I mean, it was like you could get whiplash hanging out with me in my teens and 20s.
And that's going back to when you were 16, right?
Yeah. Well,
Wow.
even prior, just because, I ran away when I was 13 the first time, but permanently at 16. Yes, I've been on my own since 16. And that was a huge,
That is huge.
It was huge. Yeah. And I was rooming, getting out, and I made several veers because my life, being responsible for yourself at that age, you're going to room veer because you're learning from the environment around you, and you're learning on hot coals, because when you're responsible for yourself, you're like, okay, can't make a huge mistake here because I'll starve.
Right. Yes.
And I don't want to be out here. This is not a good, safe place to be. I need to be, I need to get myself together.
Yeah.
And so, so that I had, even though I had read books, because I'm always reading books that are written by, I love Wayne Dyer, and I just,
Wayne Dyer.
and
Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra, Eckhart Tolle.
Yes.
Yeah. Course in Miracles, all that good stuff.
Yeah. Course in Miracles. Exactly. Marianne Williamson.
Yeah.
Amazing. So this, been in my life for 30 plus years, these names, these people, and their spirit. So at that point, going through this with my husband when I was in homeopathy, and I took some time to focus on that, and limited the amount of energy I was putting toward my work, because I had to, because my work was about feeling great, looking great.
Right.
And frankly, I didn't.
Right.
It was really hard to feel great and go in front of the camera and feel really, and
totally.
I did it as long as I could until I couldn't fake it anymore. And I didn't, I just need to let myself be and deal
That's
with.
one truth you really can't hide. If you're like physically unwell, you can't hide that.
Yeah.
There's not enough makeup.
There's not enough makeup. Exactly. You got that right. Jeez. Yes.
There's no lighting so good that can make you look well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This isn't a virtual environment.
No.
This is pre-pandemic. So
right.
Yeah, it was interesting. And so writing Awaken I literally just sat down and wrote it within about 4 months.
So does it kind of like read like a memoir? Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a memoir. It's a story of my journey and what the choices I made, the good ones, they're all good. Even the ones that caused a lot of pain and suffering for me, I feel they're all good because they all had such lessons in them. And there was the thing that I wanted more than anything in my life. Has kind of been the theme, the through line for my life, is I wanted to give love and receive love. I wanted to know what that was like, because I knew in my family throughout generations that was something that was not valued in the way that allows people to feel really cared for, really free, and okay with who they are, all their wrinkles, and I don't mean
warts and all. Yes,
warts and all, inside and out.
Yeah.
There was just a lot of that just wasn't allowed, and I think there was generational, not just my family, but societal generational training that made men behave a certain way, women behave a certain way, treat each other, a specific way. And so I write about that, how it impacted my family, how I just knew at a young age that this was not, it was not my life. And I went into nature, and nature showed me that I was a part of something much, much bigger.
Wow.
And that opened my mind in such a huge way. And I spent a tremendous amount of time escaping the dysfunction of my family in nature, which expanded my perception from the influences that were the powers in my life. Your parents are your first, the powerful people in your life. And I saw the power in the trees, and I saw the power in animals, and I saw the connection. I saw they responded to me. Dangerous animals didn't fear me. And I didn't fear them. I felt comfortable with them. They felt comfortable with me. So I learned that, okay, I'm actually more afraid of those people than I am that creature.
Yeah.
It could kill me.
I can relate, because animals, like you can predict the behavior, right? Like if you're not messing with them and they're not hungry, you can, yeah, right. They're not looking to screw you over or, screw with you. They don't have that capacity, right?
Yeah.
So if you
Yeah.
see them and they're in the wild, yeah, they might be dangerous, but you can more or less get a vibe, right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. No, that little wolf is cool. We're not,
Yeah.
we're not, that coyote's cool. He's probably not good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And my particular experience was with snakes. There were a lot of
Oh,
snakes
wow. Yeah.
in Santa Barbara. There were a lot of rattlesnakes in particular everywhere. And I just had no fear of them. I saw them all the time on my own. And I
You
picked
give
them
them a
up.
wide berth. Ooh, you picked them up. Wow.
No,
What
I
are you, like
actually,
13, 16?
oh, no. I did this when I was a little girl.
Oh, wow.
And I
Okay.
just didn't feel any fear. In fact, it used to freak my mother out because I would come home with like alligator lizards that were half my, that
My
in
goodness.
my little 5-year-old hands.
Wow.
We were, out in, we definitely did not have restrictions on it. Was get out of the house, go out and play. And we were
Yeah.
gone from, dawn till dusk.
Yeah.
And at a
I love
very young
those
age.
days. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So
That doesn't happen anymore.
No, it does not happen.
No.
And but I learned a lot in that, and I learned a lot about myself. But yeah, I just never felt fear around these snakes. In fact, I picked up many baby rattlesnakes, which are even more dangerous. I just learned how to pick them up from my family, my uncles, and my mom especially. She had a thing for animals as well. She could pick up tarantulas and snakes, and she wasn't afraid of things. So we grew up not being afraid of animals, but I just was out in nature all the time, and I felt really comfortable. Of course, salamanders were my favorite because they were just so cute, and they were just so sweet.
Yeah.
I loved that. But yeah, they didn't. Snakes didn't coil around me. They didn't in fact,
Right.
there was a cave where I grew up grew up in a place called Painted Cave in Santa Barbara. And now the cave has bars on it, but it didn't have bars when I was a little girl. And I used to go in there and take naps in there. Well, snakes notoriously like a cool, dark place.
Sure.
And then they go out and heat themselves up and they go back into. And so there were snakes in there when I was in there. And I was in there just dreaming about what my life could be as a little girl. I would fantasize and, I was bionic and I had all kinds of superpowers. I could talk to the animals. The birds could hear me. The hawks would talk to me.
Yes.
I
remember that when I was a kid. I did that. Yes.
Exactly.
I remember I was obsessed with a squirrel. I named him. We were having conversations. I wasn't crazy. I was just a kid.
Exactly. And now, what's interesting? You literally see on Instagram people with squirrels who have done. I just saw one the other day, this woman who put out a little treat for the squirrel, and the squirrel brought her a little treat.
Oh, wow.
And
that's awesome.
It is awesome. We as a species are evolving, and the way we're seeing animals and perceiving animals as having their own identifiers of what's safe and what's not. Everything isn't under us, but we are in a connection with all living things.
Totally.
That awareness is changing the way that the natural environment that surrounds us engages with us. And I think that's why we see so much of this now. And this was my life as a kid. I lived this as a little girl, and it helped me to have that courage to go out into the world at such a young age, to make a choice and say, I'm leaving this house because I can't survive here. I know I can't. I need to go. And knowing that this huge unknown world, that I would be okay. I knew it inside me, even though I experienced crazy stuff with,
I bet,
the two-leggeds. The two-legged more than the 4 and the 8 and the, definitely.
Wow.
Experienced more scary and risky and threatening experiences with people than I ever did with the natural environment. So that changed my perspective. It expanded it.
Yeah. And this was back when you're really young.
Yeah. This is when I was playing by myself outside from the age of 4.5, 5 years old.
Wow.
My mom, my family were, they were present, but they were preoccupied.
trying to find the right word.
Preoccupied. Having kids was really not a priority. It was kind of a burden. So I was like, get outside and play. Great. We just moved to the mountains and we have a huge playground. Go.
Yes.
And
try not to die.
Yeah, exactly. Try not to die. But oh gosh, I look back at it and I think, my gosh, there's so many times that could have happened. I went for miles. I would go so far away, climb trees, and like I said, around snakes. And there were, just a lot of animals around and a lot of circumstances that, that could have happened, but they didn't, because there was a symbiotic caring. I cared about where I was, and I felt it caring for me. And I think that is kind of how we create our reality, is if you feel like you're not caring, or uncared for, care for something, because you will end up receiving it. It will give back to you. That's our natural, that's the nature of our existence. The symbiotic relationship of creation is when you give to something, the tendency is it gives back. Oh, yeah. And even if it doesn't, you are rewarded from the giving. So you get to give from giving. And
that was one of my favorite things that I remember from reading all those books, was in order to keep something, you have to give it away. It never made any sense to me, but it's true.
I know. Yeah, I know.
I love the fact that there's paradox built into this stuff. If there's a paradox, keep going, because that in a weird way makes sense.
It does. Yeah, it does. And gosh, it's just such an interesting experience. Like right now, as I'm sitting here talking to you, I don't know what, I have plans, but I do my best now to pause and allow myself the choice to make a choice, to, when I feel that urge, that I think I know where I'm going and what I want, that I allow for the possibility that there might be something else.
Right.
And that's kind of what, happened with Awaken. I've only known myself as an actor, and a performer, for 28 years, at that point.
Yeah. And that's amazing.
And it's all I knew. And then all of a sudden I write a book, and I'm, speaking, and I'm working with, within Lisa's community, and I'm coaching, and I love coaching leaders to transcend that limitation, and to harness, that the art of powerful communication, which comes from, my years of being a spokesperson and being an actor and speaking other people's words. And I the combination of where I came from, what I worked through, and I would have never known, and the career that I just kind of was directed to, would come together and create something inside of me that benefits others, that they need to transcend a limitation. And I happen to have a recipe and some experience on what it looks like to make that choice and courageously map out a path that leads to what you want, the success you want, the happiness that you're longing for, based on what you think inside, you dream about, not what's come in from the outside, what's influenced you, what you perceive that are your choices, but something that's inside that is like knocking on that door. We all have it. We're all here. It's, in my, opinion, I feel like we all chose to be here, chose the life we're in.
Right.
And we get here and we forget why. And we go,
what was I going to do again?
What was I going to do again? It's like when you go into the room and go, why did I walk in this room? What did I? It happens. And we forget, and we go through these experiences, which are like the vroom vroom veers, and it drives us closer and closer. We learn, we shed some of those veneers, those impressions, those influences, those limitations, those things that we think belong to us that really didn't. They belong to generations before us. They belong to a story that's not ours, that we didn't write, that we just happen to step in and be a part of. We don't have to be the whole story. We could just be a chapter, or a few lines in the chapter. And so getting to that point, that's what I just love to help be a catalyst for that kind of change and that inspiration that arises in those in the people, in that individual themselves. It's just, I reflect it. And so they see it in themselves. And that to me is really rewarding.
So before we're getting close to wrapping up. It was really good show. I like this. This is fun. But I have to just point out. So you had a 30-year career acting. So doing like TV, movies, television commercials. And so you started that as a emancipated teen. Am I getting that?
No, I did not start as a emancipated.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry.
Well, I started the modeling aspect of it. Yes.
Okay.
I was
Gotcha.
18 when I started modeling. Yeah.
Okay.
And I moved to Italy. So
Okay.
yes,
Wow.
as an emancipated teen, I did move to Italy when I was 18 years old, and I did start that aspect of it. So yeah, I mean, it's been 30 years and I'm still working. I'm still auditioning. I'm still going out. I'm still working with my coach. And I absolutely, like I said, love the craft, and I'm able to focus on it more now than I have been, because I just, for whatever reason, something, it's been a subtle, like, oh, okay, this is where I'm going again.
Right.
Even though I have not stopped. Just during the pandemic, definitely, a lot of us stopped working.
Sure.
But
that's when you kind of have to lean into the voiceover thing.
yeah, I leaned into the book, and I leaned in. I work, like I said, with Lisa Nichols. I work within her community. I'm one of her speaker advocate coaches. So I am a contracted coach, and I do work with her. And I worked with several leaders since I wrote my book, which has been really, really interesting and fun, and developed this. Like I said, had no idea that I would ever coach.
Right.
And it is a really fun thing to experience and to have gone toward and receive that opportunity. My heart is definitely into watching that. Like I said, there's a passion that is within me to see that. It's so lovely watching people step out of what they perceived as themselves and into who they really are. And
when you help people in these ways that you're talking about, so I've been there. So I've been in two places that I'll mention, right? Like when I was very young, I did really well in a bass talent show. And I was competing in two categories, stand-up comedy and MC. So I got number one as MC and number two as comedy. I never did comedy again because I really hated writing jokes. So I was basically just winging it, right? But what I learned in that experience was that sort of like indiscriminate adoration is what I'll call it. That like, wow, you're really awesome, right? From a crowd feels really good. Almost like a drug, right?
it is.
Right? So you know that, right? And immediately that still small voice, and I think I was like 18 or 19, said, yeah, you can't handle that. And I totally backed away from that whole thing because I was like, yeah, I think you might be right about that still small voice, because that felt like too good. Then the other thing that I wanted to say is I randomly say something nice to somebody. Like during the pandemic, I was like tech support, right? I was help desk. This is Jeff, right? On the phone. And a lot of the, my coworkers were really struggling with putting together their work from home gear, right? Like, yeah, you have to be able to know how to set up your own microphone and keyboard and mouse. And, you have to be able to do all that. And, these people don't. They've had people doing that for them for years, now you're asking them to do it. And, if I could just like say, let's just slow down. It's all good. Let's work through it. We'll get there, and then you finish. It probably took too long. It was probably, but they're like crying with gratitude. Right. Yes. And that little moment is like the right kind of drug for me. That's the one that I'm drawn toward, if that makes sense. So like the indiscriminate adoration of praise from, oh, that was really funny. No. Don't want that. Right. But thank you. Thank you. Thank you for taking time and seeing me as a person.
Yeah. I fully relate to you in that, because that has been the the obstacle, the thing that has been the hardest for me to deal with, as well as an actor. I knew I had a red, like a red flag come up, and I write about it in Awaken. And I moved and went and bought a horse again.
Okay.
And I grew up with horses, so I always would find horses wherever I was. They were they were an animal that was very therapeutic to me, so I would seek them out.
Mm.
And there was a time in my life in my 20s where I knew I needed to go inside, and I was getting that kind of adulation, and I was, really vroom vrooming. And I had the same exact voice that said, you're not prepared for this.
Right.
Emotionally. Right. You cannot, you need to. And it's interesting. I took a real veer into another direction because I was still working, but it was a direction that was more important to me. It was about caring for others. It was about love. It was about helping children. And through that, it was helping that child in me, obviously, that needed. It was the giving to you also. Unbeknownst to me at the time, it was just a veer, but because I was too young to really recognize it. But what it was is I was healing and helping through the helping, and then healing through the helping.
Right. Yes.
And that was, but I have the same exact thing. When people would say things like that to me, it made me really uncomfortable. It didn't make me feel like, I knew that it was a drug that people got addicted to, because I had a lot of friends, in the industry, and I could see what it was doing to some of them. And for me, it made me so uncomfortable. It made me contract.
Right.
Because by the grace of God, I just had that sense that I wasn't prepared to manage that correctly.
Mm.
So I needed to heal. I needed to recognize that was about them. And it took me up until just recently, where I could, separate. If somebody comes up to me and does that now, I recognize it's not about me. It doesn't
have anything to do with you.
It has nothing to do with me. And
no.
It's like, awesome. I'm glad you enjoyed that, or I'm glad you saw that. And that's cool.
Mm.
And it's not personal. It's personal when we have something that's unfinished and unhealed in there, and it's filling a hole that needs to be filled with our own love.
Right.
Ourselves, our own appreciation for ourselves. When we get that from the outside in, and it feels so, so good, that's the moment to go within and look and say, I need to love the, what out of myself right now, because that felt like, water in the desert, which means self-love is like, I am, crawling in the hot sand here.
Yeah.
And I couldn't have never articulated that in my 20s when I sensed it. I just knew that I needed to not embrace it. And I didn't. So I ended up veering and still working, but not to the level and to the focus, to my agents and managers' chagrin.
Right.
Were not happy with the choices I made.
They all want to make money. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
They make money when you make money, right? So
they make money when I make money, and that's fine. That's great. But I'm not going to die.
Right. Making them money. Right.
Exactly.
And that's a lot of people have, unfortunately. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And I could see them in my head. I could feel that connection to them.
Mm.
And I could feel it. I met Sam Kinison. I met Robin Williams. I met some brilliant artists that are no longer with us, and comedians, and many other comedians, and talents. And the ones that are gone, there was that feeding, I'm not saying Robin Williams, he was just a brilliant genius, and unfortunately suffered a terrible disease. But
Sam Kinison was definitely on the train. Yes,
he was on that, and it just fueled him. And there's a lot of people in my family that have that need to be, and it's that addiction personality. And when you don't heal the addiction, you just transfer it.
Totally.
Transfer it. And
You go get another one.
people get another one. And you don't realize that the intangible, you don't realize that intangible energy transference from a crowd or an audience is extremely addicting.
Huge.
It's huge. Yeah. And it's a definite lonely place. And we've all heard the stories and seen all the stories. And it's not something I wanted. So I feel really grateful for all my vroom veers, because they brought me to the point where every single time I come back around and I realize I'm vrooming, I know there's going to be a veer, and I know I have more information on how to take that veer.
Yes. You've been inoculated.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be a black ice slide.
Black ice slide.
It doesn't have to be that.
I love it. I've actually had a black ice slide. So
have I. Does not have to be that.
It's another story. We'll save that for show number 2. Yes. So, okay, we're wrapping up now. We've had way too much fun talking about way too much rooming and veering. But so you are at, again, walkerbrandt.com. So talk a little bit about how people can best get in touch with you and check out the book.
Yes, my book is available in audiobook, and it's available on Amazon. So you can find it on all the audio channels, the Apple and Spotify and all of it. My website, walker@walkerbrandt.com. You can reach me through there, or DM me on any of my social media, Facebook, I am Walker Kimberly, and Instagrams, I am Walker Kimberly. So DM me and reach out that way. And I would love to hear from you and hear your story and hear your vroom veer. Yeah. And if mine related to you, hang in there, because it's just a cruise. It's a road trip.
It'll get better.
It'll get better.
If you're in the dark, you can't see the light. Sometimes you just have to, survive the day. That's the lesson that I take away. Sometimes that's enough, surviving the day, whatever you got to do, just survive.
Yeah. And, I want to share one more thing. There's a word. Please. Words are loaded for us. You hear the word love, it makes us feel, that feeling. You hear the word joy, you hear the word fear, you hear the word overwhelm or terror. These are all loaded over years and years within our psyche, what the meaning is. So I encourage anyone who feels like it's never going to end to say this word. A beautiful friend of mine named Michelle Colt and Robert Colt gave this to me many years ago when we first met each other. The word temporary. They taught me about these words that are in our internal thermostats, and they literally can shift us subconsciously without even realizing it. And the word temporary was huge for me. Whenever I felt that feeling like I was just, is this going to end? I would say inside my head and out loud, temporary, temporary. And let yourself say it and let it sink in, because your body and your mind have a connection to that word and its meaning, and it calms your nervous system, because your mind knows temporary means it's not forever. Your body knows there's going to be relief. And when you say it over and over, it shifts your nervous system and you start to calm down. And then Janet Bolte Taylor's wisdom comes in, that it's 90 seconds. 90 seconds of feeling goes through our body, that experience, that biology.
Wow.
But after 90 seconds, if it's still there, it's because we're putting ourselves into that experience with our mind.
Right. That makes sense.
So putting a word in there, temporary, just a simple word, and sit and say it. Watch how your nervous system in your body and your mind starts to expand instead of contract.
I like that. We could talk forever, but this show is temporary.
You are a comedian and you are an MC. You live into your truth. I applaud you.
Walker, this has been a blast. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for about an hour. Hang out for a sec. Don't hang up just yet, but I'm going to end the show. Okay.
Thanks for taking the time to ride along with us on another episode of Vroom Vroom Veer. For podcast info and show notes, be sure to head over to vvveer.com. That's VVER.com. Man, that's fun to say. And we'll catch up with you next time here on Vroom Vroom Veer.